There is one detail in this file that sounds almost ridiculous at first. But the longer you sit with it, the more disturbing it becomes. A large black garbage bag had been left inside the refuse room of an upscale residential complex in Toronto. It was more than half the height of an adult, wrapped tightly, and so heavy that one person could barely move it. Attached to the outside was a handwritten note. "Can someone lift this into the trash? Very heavy." Underneath that, the writer had added a warning. "Do not open. Renovation glass and metal. Very sharp and dangerous. It has already been wrapped." Think about what that note was asking. Someone had left an object too heavy to lift beside an industrial trash compactor. They knew a maintenance worker would eventually find it. They knew the worker might hesitate. So they provided an explanation. Glass. Metal. Renovation debris. Dangerous, but harmless as long as no one opened it. And most importantly, they asked a stranger to finish the job. "Hello, it is good to see you again. I'm Hi. You're listening to Grey Verdict Files." The cleaner who found the bag worked in the Liberty Village area of Toronto. It was June 2023. The weather was warm, the underground level was humid, and the garbage room already carried the usual mix of unpleasant smells. Nothing about that environment was inviting. Even so, this bag stood out. It was too large, too carefully wrapped, and much too heavy. The cleaner tried to push it toward the opening of the trash compactor. It would not move easily. He called a coworker over the intercom and asked for help. Together, the two men lifted the package toward the intake, which sat more than a meter above the floor. They almost succeeded. But while they were struggling with the weight, the outer plastic tore. Inside was not broken glass. It was a blanket. The blanket had been wrapped again and again with adhesive tape. Whatever lay beneath it did not feel hard or jagged. It felt soft. Worse, liquid had begun seeping from the torn section. A powerful odor spread through the room. The cleaner knew the smell of a dead rat. Anyone who has worked around basements, garbage rooms, or service areas probably does. But this was no rat. The package was too large for a cat. Too large for a dog. Too heavy for any explanation that still sounded ordinary. The two workers stepped back and called the police. Officers arrived and began removing the outer layers. The smell intensified as soon as they disturbed the blanket. Investigators wearing protective equipment eventually found a naked human body curled into a fetal position. The body had been concealed beneath multiple layers of material and tape. Warm weather and the damp underground environment had accelerated decomposition. The face was no longer recognizable. 1 week passed before DNA testing provided a name. The man inside the bag was 53-year-old Reyes Habib, a director, screenwriter, and independent film producer who lived alone in another condominium unit only a little more than 100 meters from where his body was found. And that distance creates the first question. Why move a body at all if you are only going to leave it inside the same residential community? Whoever wrapped Habib had not taken him to a remote road, a forest, a lake, or an abandoned building. The body remained surrounded by homes, cameras, access doors, residents, cleaners, and staff. It was hidden. But barely. There was another problem. Habib had already been reported missing. On the afternoon of June 6th, he was supposed to meet a friend for tennis. He never arrived. Calls went unanswered. Friends went to his home and knocked, but no one responded. By the following day, they were worried enough to contact police. Habib was an adult with no reported mental impairment. A short unexplained absence did not immediately become a high-priority investigation. His information was posted online as a missing person, but there was no major search operation. Only a few days later, his body appeared in the garbage room. Based on the condition of the remains, investigators believed he may have died sometime between the night of June 5 and the morning of June 6. His body carried numerous injuries. Some appeared to have occurred before death. Others appeared to have occurred afterward. Decomposition had caused additional damage. The condition of the body left the medical examiner with a serious limitation. The exact cause of death could not be determined. No clear strangulation finding. No single fatal wound. No obvious injury that explained everything. That uncertainty would remain important all the way to court. But early in the investigation, police still had to find the place where Habib had died. Residents recalled hearing unusual sounds around the time he disappeared. One neighbor described noises from the direction of Habib's apartment during the early hours of June 6. There may have been a cry for help. There were sounds of running, impacts, and movement. The disturbance was brief. It stopped before anyone called police. The residents who heard it later explained that they did not want to interfere in something that might have been private. The building returned to silence, and the moment passed. Police entered Habib's apartment expecting to find the answer there. They did not. The furniture appeared to be in place. There were no obvious signs of a violent struggle. No visible blood. No wrecked room. No clear indication that a man had been beaten or killed inside. Expensive filmmaking equipment remained untouched. That mattered. Habib owned cameras and production gear worth a significant amount of money. If robbery had brought someone into the apartment, why leave the most valuable items behind? The home looked too normal. The body had too many injuries. And the sounds reported by neighbors seemed too violent. Those three things did not fit together. Either the apartment was not the real scene, or someone had been extremely thorough. Police did not yet know which explanation was worse. And somewhere inside the complex, a person still had access to something that should have disappeared with Habib. His electronic key fob. Electronic access records are not dramatic. They do not look like blood evidence. They do not appear threatening in an evidence bag. Most of the time, they are nothing more than rows of dates, times, and door locations. But this file turned on one of those rows. Investigators learned that Habib's access fob had been used at the underground garage entrance during the early hours of June 8. Stop there for a moment. Habib was believed to have been dead by June 6. His body had not yet been identified, but according to the forensic timeline, he could not have used that fob 2 days later. So who did? The answer might have solved the case immediately if the garage camera had captured a clear face. It did not. Footage showed a man in dark clothing and a hat. He kept the brim low. His face remained difficult to see. A similarly dressed figure appeared near the garbage area the same day, but that image was even worse. The lighting was poor. The angles were unhelpful. The footage confirmed movement without confirming identity. Camera evidence can be frustrating like that. It gives investigators just enough to know something happened, but not enough to say who did it. Still, police had one advantage. A person can hide a face. It is much harder to hide every object they carry. Investigators collected additional surveillance footage from around the community and reviewed it frame by frame. During daylight on June 8, a man was seen riding a bicycle away from the area. Several hours later, he returned on foot. The bicycle belonged to Habib. This image was clearer. The sun was up. The camera had a better angle. Police could finally see the rider's face. The man lived directly below Habib. He was identified in the source file as Cotran, a 33-year-old software engineer who lived with his wife, Isabelle Nguyen, and one of Isabelle's female cousins. Police had already spoken to the household. Co and Isabelle said they had been asleep on the night Habib disappeared. According to them, neither had heard anything unusual. But Isabel's cousin told a different story. She remembered waking around 1 in the morning to the sound of a man shouting, "Help! Help!" She also heard something heavy moving or falling on the stairs. She was frightened and considered checking what was happening. Isabel stopped her. According to the cousin, Isabel said the man upstairs was a director. He sometimes filmed scenes inside his home. Loud acting or dramatic noises were not unusual. The explanation was possible. Habib worked in film. He did record material. Someone hearing strange sounds through a ceiling could misunderstand what was happening. But here is the part that caused the first real crack. The cousin remembered only 2 women being inside the downstairs apartment at that moment. Ko was not there. His earlier account placed him at home, sleeping so deeply that he heard nothing. The apartment was tiny, about 450 square feet, or roughly 41.8 square meters. The source compares it to an area smaller than 3 standard North American parking spaces placed together. Inside that limited space were a kitchen, bathroom, living area, bedroom, laundry equipment, storage, and 3 adults. Privacy would have been almost non-existent. If Isabel and her cousin were awake because of shouting and heavy impacts above them, how could Ko have slept through the same disturbance? And if the cousin was correct that Ko was not inside the apartment, where was he? A second neighbor complicated things further. That person remembered seeing Ko come out of Habib's home the day after the suspected killing. Police showed Ko the surveillance images. He initially denied being the person who had used Habib's access fob. But he did admit taking Habib's bicycle. His explanation was unusual. Ko said he had not stolen the bicycle because he never intended to keep it. He had ridden it to a more distant road and abandoned it there. Why? Because, according to him, he disliked Habib and wanted to inconvenience him. He wanted Habib to have to walk. Read that explanation again. Habib was missing. His bicycle was taken from a secured residential garage. Ko admitted moving and abandoning it. But he insisted this was not connected to Habib's disappearance. It was only an act of petty revenge. Could that be true? Technically, yes. People involved in long-running disputes sometimes behave in irrational, childish ways. Taking a rival's property and discarding it could be exactly that. But the timing was devastating. Ko did not move the bicycle during an argument months earlier. He did it after Habib was believed to be dead. And the bicycle was not the only property that vanished. Police would later learn that Ko had also discarded Habib's computer bag, tennis racket, and other personal items that had been inside Habib's apartment. That opened a much more serious question. How did a downstairs neighbor obtain several objects from the home of a missing man? Ko had another explanation for that too. He claimed Habib had once entrusted him with a spare key because Habib worried about locking himself out. When Ko noticed Habib had been gone for 2 or 3 days, he assumed the man had taken a trip. He entered the apartment, removed some belongings, and threw them away to annoy him. That story required police to believe 2 things. First, that a man gave an apartment key to someone with whom he had a bitter feud. Second, that this person entered the home during his absence and disposed of multiple personal items purely as harassment. It was not impossible. But it was becoming increasingly difficult to accept. And the reason lay in a conflict that had started years earlier with something so ordinary that no one in the building believed it could ever become dangerous. A barbecue grill. To understand why police could not dismiss Ko, we have to go backward. Not to childhood. Not to school. Not to some hidden criminal history. Just to 2 small homes stacked on top of each other. Habib lived in an upper-level unit in the Liberty Village community. Ko and Isabel lived below him. When the couple first moved in, the relationship between the neighbors was friendly enough. Ko sometimes invited Habib for coffee. They were not close friends, but there was no open hostility. The property had been marketed toward urban residents who valued location over space. The community consisted of hundreds of townhouse-style units rather than one single high-rise tower. Owners used keys for their homes and electronic fobs for shared areas such as the underground garage and garbage room. Co and Isabel had bought their small unit after searching Toronto's expensive housing market. The price was close to $450,000 Canadian dollars. They hesitated because the interior was so compact, but the location was attractive. Downtown Toronto, financial offices, sports venues, and the CN Tower were only a few kilometers away. There was also a balcony. The balcony became the selling point. Co loved cooking. Outside work, exercise, gaming, and social gatherings, food was one of his main interests. The idea of warm evenings, cold drinks, and grilled meals made the small home feel more livable. For a while, it was. The conflict emerged during the pandemic, when more residents spent long periods inside their homes. Habib's film work slowed, and Co worked from home. The two men were now separated by only one floor for much of the day. Co began using the balcony for barbecuing. Smoke rises. Habib's balcony was directly above. The smoke, oil, and cooking odors drifted into Habib's unit. According to the file, Habib said he had a chronic respiratory condition and that smoke could aggravate his asthma. He showed Co medical documentation and asked him to stop grilling outside. Co believed the complaint was exaggerated. From his perspective, he was cooking on his own property. He did not barbecue every day. He proposed a compromise. Before using the grill, he would send Habib a message so the upstairs neighbor could close his windows and avoid the balcony. To Co, that sounded reasonable. To Habib, it solved almost nothing. The odor did not disappear as soon as the grill was turned off. Smoke entered through open windows. Fabric, furniture, bedding, and the balcony area could retain the smell. Habib said the air sometimes remained unpleasant the following day. He did not like relying heavily on air conditioning, which meant hot nights with the windows closed became uncomfortable. He wanted the grilling stopped entirely. Co refused. From that point, the dispute stopped being about smoke alone. Each man believed the other was refusing to recognize a basic right. Habib believed he had the right to breathe safely inside his home. Co believed he had the right to cook on a balcony that had been advertised as part of the property. The condominium board became involved. These boards often consist of elected owners serving without pay. Their powers can be limited. They cannot investigate like police, remove residents without legal process, or issue major penalties casually. Formal action can require votes, legal costs, and time. The board visited the units. According to the file, members concluded that the smell fell within the range of normal cooking. They suggested compromise and mutual respect. Habib was advised that an air purifier might help. He did not accept that answer. From his view, he was the person suffering the consequences, yet he was being asked to buy equipment and adjust his life. The board faced another difficulty. The community did not prohibit balcony grilling. In fact, balcony use had been part of the lifestyle sold to buyers. Smoke appeared intermittently, making it difficult to measure. Other complaints in the complex involved louder music, dogs, short-term rental guests, and suspected drug activity. Against that background, a barbecue dispute sounded minor. Only Habib's unit was directly affected because of the vertical layout. The easiest administrative solution was to ask the two men to handle the matter themselves. A note was placed on the complaint indicating that residents could resolve it privately. That phrase looks harmless on paper. Residents can resolve this themselves. But what happens when they cannot? Habib contacted property management. He contacted police. He approached other neighbors and tried to gather support for removing Co and Isabel from the community. Most residents stayed out of it. They did not smell the smoke the way he did. They did not want legal fees or conflict. To them, the problem belonged to two households. Habib began responding in his own way. He played loud music late at night. He dragged furniture. He walked heavily. He created noise inside his apartment. Other residents eventually complained because the disturbance affected them too. When noise did not produce the result he wanted, he poured water down toward the balcony below. When Ko invited friends over to eat, Habib made loud sounds above them. Ko described another encounter in court. He said he had been walking with a colleague when Habib loudly commented on the smell coming from Ko's home and asked whether the family was cooking dog meat. For Ko, the remark was humiliating. He began retaliating more deliberately. He kept grilling. The menu expanded to pork ribs, pork chops, and smoked pork dishes. The file points out that Habib was Muslim, making the choice of pork especially provocative. Whether every meal was selected specifically to offend him cannot be proved from the cooking alone. But Ko later acknowledged the hostility between them. The barbecue had become a weapon in a private war. Each spring and summer, the conflict returned. Winter offered a temporary ceasefire because the balcony was less useful. But the underlying resentment never disappeared. Ko considered selling the unit. Toronto's housing market made that difficult. Prices had risen sharply and later fallen. Selling was not simple, and finding another suitable home was not easy. Habib had lived in his unit for more than a decade. He was not prepared to leave either. So they stayed. Two educated professionals. Two small homes. One floor between them. 3 years of complaints, noise, smoke, water, insults, messages, and resentment. Still, none of that proves murder. Long-running neighbor disputes happen everywhere. Most end with legal action, relocation, exhaustion, or permanent silence. Police needed more than motive. They needed to know what had changed shortly before Habib disappeared. That change arrived when a third person moved into the apartment below. And according to testimony, Habib believed she could be used to break the marriage apart. Isabel's cousin came from Vietnam during the spring of 2023. She was visiting family and also considering educational options in Toronto. The already small apartment became even more crowded. Ko welcomed her out of respect for his wife's family. But the arrangement created a new opening in the feud. According to Ko's later testimony, rumors began circulating through the community. One version claimed he was having a sexual relationship with Isabel's cousin while his wife was away. Another suggested all three adults were involved together. The claims became more serious. Ko said Habib began alleging that the couple was connected to human trafficking and that the woman living with them was not really a cousin but a vulnerable Vietnamese woman brought to Canada for prostitution. The rumor suggested more women would follow and that the apartment was part of a larger criminal operation. These were no longer insults about food. They were accusations capable of damaging a marriage, a career, immigration plans, and personal reputation. Ko confronted Habib and demanded an apology and a public correction. According to the file, Habib refused. He allegedly said he had friends in the community and that the stories would continue to spread. We have to be careful here. This account came from Ko, the man who later stood trial. It explains his claimed anger, but it does not automatically make every statement objective fact. Still, other evidence confirmed that the relationship between the neighbors had become openly hostile. Residents had seen them shouting across the balconies. The dispute had moved far beyond polite complaints to management. Warm weather returned, and so did the grilling. Ko responded to the rumors by using the barbecue even more aggressively. Habib responded with confrontation. By early June, the conflict had reached a level where both men appeared determined not merely to live as they wished but to defeat the other. On the evening of June 6, residents heard them arguing again. Hours later, a man was heard shouting for help. A heavy object seemed to move or fall on the stairs. Habib missed his tennis meeting. Ko's household gave statements that did not match. And 2 days later, Habib's electronic access fob opened the garage door for someone else. Look at how those details begin to connect. A feud supplies a reason for contact. The sounds suggest a confrontation. The cousin places Ko away from his own apartment. The access record places someone in the shared garage. The bicycle places Ko with Habib's property. But one part of the file still resisted every theory. Habib's apartment showed no obvious signs of violence. If the confrontation happened upstairs, where was the blood? If something happened on the staircase, why was there no clear physical trace? If Habib died in the downstairs unit, how did he get there? Investigators began looking more carefully at Ko and Isabel's home. Habib's nephew visited the couple after the disappearance to ask whether they knew where his uncle was. He later testified that a powerful smell of cleaning chemicals filled the apartment. A police investigator also described items inside the home as unusually new and clean. The kitchen cutting board, utensils, and even curtains appeared recently replaced. That did not prove what had occurred. People clean homes. People replace kitchen items. People buy new curtains. But timing changes the meaning of ordinary actions. A deep cleaning shortly after a neighbor vanishes may be innocent. Replacing several household items may also be innocent. Yet when the same home belongs to a man seen disposing of the missing neighbor's belongings, those details become harder to ignore. The prosecution would later argue that Ko and Isabel's small kitchen may have been the true crime scene or a location where Habib's body was handled before being wrapped. That remained an allegation. No witness described seeing the body inside the apartment. No confirmed blood pattern was presented in the source file. The medical examiner could not identify the exact fatal injury. But prosecutors believed the cleaning explained why police had not found an obvious scene. They also believed the garbage bag told a story. Whoever prepared the package had wrapped the body in a blanket and sealed it with tape. The person had placed the bundle inside an outer bag. A handwritten note described renovation debris and warned workers not to open it. The likely goal, prosecutors argued, was to have building staff lift the package into the trash compactor. Once inside, it might be crushed and carried away with other waste. The plan failed for a basic reason. The package was too large and too heavy. The workers could not lift it cleanly. The bag tore. Fluid escaped. The smell exposed what the note was trying to hide. It was not a sophisticated disposal plan. But it was calculated enough to involve another human being. The writer did not simply abandon the body. They created instructions designed to manipulate the next person who found it. And police still had not answered the most obvious question. Who wrote the note? By this stage, Ko's behavior looked deeply suspicious. But suspicion is not proof. His defense could point to several weaknesses. No one had seen him attack Habib. No weapon had been recovered. No confirmed cause of death existed. The surveillance images from the dark garage were not clear enough to identify a face. Even the bicycle evidence had an alternative explanation, however strange it sounded. Ko admitted taking the bicycle. An admission of petty theft or harassment is not the same as an admission of killing someone. The defense position was simple. Police had found the most obvious enemy and built the case backward around him. A bitter neighbor could steal property without committing murder. A man could tell lies because he feared being blamed. A household could clean itself for reasons unrelated to a death. Ko's lawyer described the prosecution's case as lacking three critical things. No direct witness. No murder weapon. No established cause of death. That argument mattered because the legal question was not whether Ko behaved badly. The question was whether the evidence proved he caused Habib's death with the mental state required for murder. police continued tracing Habib's belongings. The bicycle had been left on a distant road. The computer bag was discarded separately. The tennis racket and other possessions were also removed. Why divide the items? One possibility was simple harassment, just as Ko claimed. Another possibility was that someone wanted Habib's disappearance to look voluntary or confusing. Removing a tennis racket could affect the interpretation of the missed tennis appointment. Removing a computer bag could suggest travel or work. Abandoning the bicycle elsewhere could move attention away from the condominium. The source file does not establish exactly what the person intended. We should not turn theory into fact. Still, a pattern was clear. Someone entered Habib's space after he stopped responding. Objects left his home. His fob was used. His bicycle was moved. His body was placed in a shared garbage room. And one man admitted responsibility for moving several of those objects. Ko also sent a message to a neighbor that prosecutors later presented in court. "You don't think the police suspect me, do you?" On its own, that sentence proves very little. Anyone involved in a public feud with a missing neighbor might fear suspicion. But context matters again. Ko had already lied or changed his position about the access footage. He had disposed of property. His statement about sleeping at home conflicted with the cousin's recollection. A neighbor reported seeing him enter Habib's apartment. The text message became one more piece of a growing structure. Investigators also used computer software to compare the body shape, posture, and walking style of the person recorded using Habib's fob with known footage of company. According to the prosecution, the analysis indicated more than a 90% probability that the person was company. Gait analysis is not the same as a fingerprint or DNA profile. Clothing, camera angle, image quality, injury, footwear, and posture can affect movement. But prosecutors did not rely on that comparison alone. They placed it beside the bicycle footage. Beside the discarded property. Beside the access record. Beside the inconsistent accounts. Beside the cleaning evidence. The case was becoming circumstantial in the truest meaning of the word. No single early detail solved it. But each circumstance narrowed the number of believable explanations. Ko continued insisting that he had only entered Habib's unit because he possessed a spare key. That claim created a strange reversal. The two men had once been friendly. Ko had invited Habib for coffee. A spare key might have been exchanged during that earlier period. But their relationship later deteriorated into years of complaints and retaliation. Would Habib have allowed an enemy to keep access to his home? Maybe he forgot Ko still had it. Maybe the key was never returned. Maybe Ko obtained it in some other way. The source does not settle that question. What the key explanation did accomplish was place Ko inside Habib's apartment by his own account. He no longer had to deny entry. He only had to deny what happened there. The investigation also widened toward Isabel. Her cousin said Isabel had discouraged her from checking the sounds above. That alone was not criminal. Two women hearing a frightening disturbance in the middle of the night might reasonably decide not to intervene. But according to the cousin, Ko later learned that her account differed from Isabel's. He told her not to speak carelessly to police and said the family needed to maintain one consistent story. Again, pause. Wanting consistency is not automatically evidence of a conspiracy. People under investigation often fear misunderstandings. But asking witnesses to align their accounts becomes much more concerning when the accounts involve whether a suspect was home during a possible killing. The cousin's testimony placed Isabel in a difficult position. She had heard, or at least responded to, the disturbance. She knew Ko was not in the apartment, according to the cousin. She later told police they had both slept through the night. And the home smelled strongly of cleaning products shortly afterward. Investigators began to suspect that the case did not involve only one person. Yet even with all of this, prosecutors faced the same weakness. They could show concealment. They could show access. They could show hostility. Could they show murder? The answer did not emerge from the apartment. It came from the object wrapped around Habib's body. The trial opened in Toronto in May 2026, according to the source file. Coe faced a charge of second-degree murder. Isabelle faced accusations connected to assisting the offense and indignity to a body. By the time proceedings began, the case had been hanging over them for nearly 3 years. They had spent close to 2 years on release under electronic monitoring. The prosecution started with witnesses who described the aftermath. Habib's nephew spoke about the powerful smell of disinfectant inside Coe and Isabelle's home. An investigator described the unusually clean condition of the kitchen and the apparently new board, utensils, and curtains. Neighbors discussed the feud. Surveillance footage showed the movement of the bicycle and the man using the garage. The text message raised questions. The cousin described the screams, the heavy sound on the stairs, Coe's absence, Isabelle's reaction, and the later demand for a consistent account. Still, the defense could attack each item individually. A smell is subjective. New curtains do not prove a killing. Neighbors may misremember. Surveillance can be unclear. A family member can misunderstand an instruction. A hostile relationship creates bias in both directions. The defense waited for the prosecution to produce something physical. During the second week of trial, prosecutors revealed evidence that had not previously been made public. Coe's DNA was found on the adhesive tape used to secure the blanket around Habib's body. His fingerprint was found on the handwritten note attached to the garbage bag. This was the moment the structure changed. Before that, Coe could explain his connection to the building. He lived there. He used the garbage room. His DNA and fingerprints could naturally exist in shared spaces. But the tape was not lying loose on the floor. It was used to bind the blanket around the body. It was inside the garbage bag. The prosecution's expert emphasized that point. The note carried only 2 identified sets of fingerprints, one from the cleaner who found it and one from company. The defense argued that Coe and Isabelle frequently used the communal garbage area. Contact transfer could occur. Shared facilities create countless opportunities for innocent traces to move. That argument may explain a fingerprint on a door handle. It may explain DNA on the outside of a bin. But how does a resident's DNA reach tape wrapped around a body inside a sealed bag without that resident touching the wrapping material? The defense had to offer an innocent route. No convincing route appears in the source file. The fingerprint on the note was even harder to separate from the disposal plan. The writer had used the note to encourage staff to lift the package into the compactor. If Coe touched the paper innocently before it was written, when did that happen? If he touched it after it was attached, why? If someone else borrowed a piece of paper he had handled, why was his print the only unexplained print on it? A fingerprint does not automatically identify the writer. But paired with DNA inside the packaging, the note became more than a strange object. It became a link between Coe and the concealment. This is where the case gained a distinction that matters. The physical evidence did not necessarily prove the exact manner of death. It strongly connected Coe to the body after death. That left the jury with 2 separate questions. Did Coe help conceal a body? And did he also cause the death? The first question appeared increasingly difficult for the defense to contest. The second remained legally complicated. Because the medical examiner still could not say exactly how Habib died. The body's condition allowed multiple possibilities. He may have been strangled. He may have fallen on the stairs and suffered a fatal head injury. He may have died from blood loss. The defense even raised the possibility of a heart attack. If Habib died accidentally during an argument, the legal result could be very different from second-degree murder. If he suffered a medical emergency and co-panicked, the prosecution's murder theory would weaken further. The defense focused heavily on that gap.
No cause of death meant no clear mechanism. No mechanism meant no reliable way to reconstruct intent.
No reliable intent meant the jury could not simply infer murder from concealment. It was a serious argument. People sometimes hide accidental deaths because they fear blame, deportation, financial consequences, family disgrace, or criminal investigation.
A terrible decision made after a death does not necessarily prove a deliberate decision before it.
Prosecutors answered with behavior.
They pointed to the wrapping,
the false renovation warning, the movement of the body, the disposal of property in separate locations,
the use of the access fob,
the deep cleaning,
the replacement of household items,
the efforts to align statements, the removal of evidence from Habib's home. The prosecution asked the jury to consider how many actions could still be explained as panic. A frightened person might delay calling police. A frightened person might lie once. But this concealment required multiple stages.
Obtain wrapping materials.
Handle the body. Secure it with tape. Place it inside a bag. Write a false note. Move it through the residential complex. Leave it beside a compactor. Enter Habib's apartment. Remove possessions. Discard them in different places. Clean the home.
Replace items that may have retained traces.
The prosecution argued that these were not the actions of uninvolved neighbors who discovered a natural death. They were the actions of people trying to erase their connection to whatever happened. But there was still one dangerous leap. Covering up a death can prove consciousness of guilt. It does not always prove murder. The jury would have to decide whether the cover-up was so extensive that the underlying event could not reasonably have been an accident. And before they could decide that, they had to return to the 1 minute of noise that everyone had ignored. Around 1 a.m, Isabel's cousin heard a man shouting for help. The words were brief. "Help! Help!" She heard heavy movement on the stairs. It sounded as though something large had fallen or rolled. She wanted to investigate. Isabel told her not to. The explanation was that Habib worked in film and could be recording a scene. That explanation deserves a fair look. Habib was a director and screenwriter. He had professional equipment. Residents may have heard unusual sounds from his unit before. A loud voice from above would not automatically mean someone was in danger. But the file gives us a detail that changes the interpretation. Habib had arranged to play tennis that afternoon. He did not show up. His phone went unanswered. He was not seen alive again. So the sounds were not followed by a normal day. They were followed by disappearance. Another neighbor also remembered cries, running, and impact sounds coming from Habib's direction during the relevant period. No one called police. That decision is easy to judge from a distance. Inside an apartment at 1 a.m, things feel less certain. A person hears a noise. It stops. They wonder whether it came from a television, a couple arguing, a dropped object, an intoxicated resident, or something private. By the time anyone considers calling, the building is quiet again. The problem is that brief silence can conceal the exact moment when intervention mattered. Investigators tried to understand where the movement occurred. The defense suggested Habib could have fallen down the stairs during a confrontation. If Ko shoved him without intending serious harm, the incident could support manslaughter rather than murder. That theory fit one part of the cousin's description, the heavy sound on the staircase. But it did not resolve everything. Habib's body carried numerous injuries, including injuries believed to have occurred before death. The medical examiner could not isolate the fatal one, yet the condition of the body suggested more than a simple unexplained collapse. Prosecutors argued that the violence was knowing and severe enough that death was a foreseeable result. The defense emphasized uncertainty. This distinction would eventually become the central issue for the jury. Not whether Coe had handled the body. Not whether he had disposed of Habib's belongings. Not whether he had lied. The question was whether the death resulted from an intentional act meeting the legal standard for second-degree murder or from a lesser form of unlawful violence. And Isabel's role carried a separate problem. No evidence in the source file established that she struck Habib. The prosecution instead focused on assistance. She allegedly stopped her cousin from investigating. She gave an account that placed Coe at home. Her account differed from the cousin's. The apartment was intensely cleaned. Property appeared to have been replaced. The body was wrapped and moved. Someone had to help lift it. Habib's package was described as extremely heavy. 2 maintenance workers struggled to raise it. The prosecution believed one person may have had difficulty preparing and transporting it alone. That did not prove Isabel's participation by itself. But the physical challenge supported the idea that Coe had help. The file also places the body in a fetal position, tightly wrapped. Positioning an adult body, maintaining the blanket, applying layers of tape, and moving the package through doors and shared areas would have required time and effort. Whoever did it also had to avoid being seen. The access record placed the fob at the garage entrance on June 8. The camera showed a dark-clothed figure. The garbage room footage showed a similarly dressed man. The bicycle footage provided the face. The path of movement began to form. But there was a missing gap between the death and the disposal. What happened to Habib's body during those 2 days? Was it inside his own apartment? Inside Coe and Isabel's apartment? In a vehicle? In a storage area? The source does not provide a confirmed answer. The odor of disinfectant and replacement of items led prosecutors toward the downstairs kitchen. But no definitive forensic reconstruction appears in the file. That gap left room for the defense to argue that police had created a narrative they could not physically prove. A jury does not need video of the entire crime. Circumstantial evidence can be enough. But when the cause of death is unknown, every missing step becomes more important. Coe's legal team returned to a basic principle. A person must not be convicted of murder merely because their conduct looks terrible. The prosecution has to prove the elements beyond reasonable doubt. The defense suggested that Habib may have experienced a medical emergency during a confrontation. Perhaps Coe found himself facing a dead neighbor and panicked. Perhaps he feared that the long conflict would make him an automatic suspect. Perhaps he chose concealment because he believed no one would accept an accidental explanation. The prosecution challenged that version with one simple question. Why not call an ambulance? If Habib fell, why not ask for help? If he suffered a heart attack, why not report it? Why wrap him naked in a blanket? Why write a false note? Why try to send his body into a trash compactor? Why enter his home and scatter his possessions? The defense could answer each question with panic. But the more questions accumulated, the less ordinary panic appeared. And the jury still had not heard the detail that tied the cover-up back to the original feud. Coe did not claim he had no reason to hate Habib. He admitted the hatred. By the time police fully examined Habib's life, one early theory had already begun to fade. Investigators initially considered whether his death might be connected to his work, religious background, or the social issues explored in independent film. This was not an irrational concern. Independent productions can address religion, traditional values, sexuality, gender roles, and personal freedom. Filmmakers involved in controversial subjects sometimes receive online abuse or threats. Habib came from a conservative Muslim family but had been born and raised in Canada. He was described as open-minded. He graduated from the University of Toronto and spent more than a decade working in finance before changing direction in middle age. He left the more predictable career and studied directing at the University of Southern California's School of Cinematic Arts. The program carried enormous prestige. Alumni connected to the school included major figures in American film, such as George Lucas and Ron Howard. The source also links it to the professional network surrounding large entertainment companies. For Habib, entering that world meant more than learning technique. It meant pursuing a second life. He worked on sets in California and New York before returning to Toronto. His main creative project was a film identified in the source as Fat Lady's Rickshaw. The film was described as a low-budget comedy about a young woman working in a restaurant kitchen. She becomes involved in an underground surrogacy arrangement to help repay her father's high-interest debt. During pregnancy, changing tastes lead to an intense love of sriracha sauce. The story uses humor to explore emotional attachment to the unborn child, women's autonomy, fertility pressure, surrogacy, and traditional expectations within Muslim families. Habib cited films such as Juno and early A24 productions as inspirations. He wanted to use awkward, everyday comedy to approach serious social issues. Funding was difficult. The script remained unproduced for years. The film industry slowed during the pandemic. Habib supported himself by making web content, advertisements, and smaller projects. A funding program supporting creators from minority communities eventually gave the project momentum. Production began in the spring of 2022. When Habib died, the film was still in post-production, but a Toronto distributor had already taken interest and early promotional planning had begun. At 53, after years of trying to establish himself, Habib appeared close to releasing his first major feature. His friends described him as positive, ambitious, and committed to his dream. That background initially made the death feel larger than a neighbor dispute. Police had to consider whether the content of his work had created enemies. A person involved in culturally sensitive storytelling could have received threats unknown to neighbors. But the evidence did not move outward toward the film world. It moved downward. One floor. Toward the man with the bicycle. Toward the access fob. Toward the fingerprint on the note. Toward the DNA on the tape. The contrast is difficult to ignore. Habib spent years struggling to bring a film to the screen. His death did not appear connected to international controversy, professional jealousy, or a secret dispute in the entertainment industry. According to the prosecution, it grew from smoke drifting between two balconies. That sounds too small. Maybe that is why the conflict became so dangerous. Each individual event looked minor enough for outsiders to dismiss. A barbecue. A complaint. A noisy night. Water poured from above. An offensive remark. Another message. Another report to management. Another summer. No single event seemed important enough to justify major intervention. But Habib & Co. did not experience the conflict as a list of small incidents. Each man experienced it as continuous disrespect. Habib believed his health and home had been invaded. Co believed his property rights and reputation had been attacked. Habib tried official channels and felt ignored. Co believed the official records showed he had offered compromise. Habib escalated with noise and water. Co escalated with more smoke and provocative food. Habib allegedly spread sexual and criminal rumors. Co confronted him. Neither man left. Neither man surrendered. By June 2023, the dispute had become part of daily identity. Habib was no longer simply the neighbor upstairs. Co was no longer simply the man below. They had become symbols of everything the other believed was unfair. That does not make violence inevitable. Most intense disputes still do not end in death. But it explains why investigators could not treat the argument on June 6 as an isolated exchange. It was the latest moment in a conflict built over 3 years. Coe's defense also used that history. Because everyone knew about the feud, he was the easiest person to blame. Once Habib disappeared, neighbors could reinterpret every old argument as evidence of murder. A man already disliked by the victim could become guilty in public opinion before the physical case was complete. That danger is real. Motive can guide investigators. It can also blind them. The jury had to decide whether police had followed evidence toward Coe or forced evidence to fit him. The tape and note made the defense position much harder. But the exact level of guilt remained open. Was this planned? Did Coe go upstairs intending to kill? Did an argument become physical? Did Habib fall? Did the violence continue after he was injured? Did Isabel participate before death or only afterward? The source file does not provide a precise reconstruction. That uncertainty became the center of the jury room. And according to one anonymous juror, the hardest debate was not whether Coe was involved. It was what kind of killing the evidence proved. The jury deliberated for 4 days. One anonymous member later said jurors had little doubt that Coe was responsible for Habib's death. The division concerned the legal category. Second-degree murder required a level of intent or knowledge beyond an accidental push. Manslaughter could apply if a confrontation became physical and Habib died without Coe intending the fatal result. The stairway sounds kept that possibility alive. Imagine an argument between two men who have despised each other for years. Voices rise. One person pushes. The other loses balance. A fall causes a head injury. That can produce death without a prior plan to kill. The defense wanted the jury to remain in that uncertain space. The medical examiner could not identify a definitive cause of death. The body was too decomposed. Injuries before death, injuries after death, and damage caused by decomposition overlapped. The jury could not know whether Habib was strangled, beaten, pushed, or affected by a medical crisis. Without certainty, the defense argued, the law required caution. The prosecution did not have to prove every second of the attack. It argued that the pre-death injuries and the intensity of the concealment supported a violent act committed with awareness that death could result. Jurors discussed whether the cover-up was evidence of panic or evidence of the seriousness of the underlying conduct. This is the most difficult part of the file. A person's behavior after death can reveal what they believed happened. But it can also reflect fear rather than original intent. Coe's actions were not neutral. He did not merely fail to report the death. He became linked to the tape around the body and the note on the bag. He used or possessed Habib's fob. He rode Habib's bicycle away and abandoned it. He removed a computer bag, tennis racket, and other property. He entered Habib's apartment. He offered explanations jurors could find implausible. His household gave conflicting statements. The apartment was heavily cleaned. Items appeared newly replaced. The body was left beside a compactor under a false warning. The jury eventually concluded that the effort to conceal the death was too extensive to fit an innocent accident. According to the anonymous juror, the cover-up looked excessive even for a fatal fall. The jurors decided that the underlying violence had been committed with knowledge serious harm or death could result. Coe was found guilty of second-degree murder. Isabel was found guilty of offenses connected to assisting in committing an indignity to Habib's body. The source file states that Coe faced the possibility of a sentence as high as 25 years, while Isabel could face approximately 3 to 5 years. Sentencing was scheduled for September 2026. Both indicated that they intended to appeal. That matters. A jury verdict is a legal determination, but the appeal process may challenge evidence, instructions, admissibility, or the interpretation of the law. The final procedural history was not complete in the source file. The verdict answered one question for the trial court. It did not answer every question inside the case. We still do not know the exact cause of death. We do not know the full sequence inside the apartment or stairwell. We do not know who first suggested the disposal plan. We do not know exactly where the body was kept between the night of the confrontation and the early hours of June 8. We do not know whether the killing began as a planned attack or as another argument that escalated beyond control. The jury reached its conclusion through a chain of evidence rather than one complete reconstruction. That chain began with a handwritten note. A note telling a cleaner not to look. A note warning of sharp glass. A note asking someone else to lift the package into the machine. And this is where the file becomes more than a courtroom question. Because the note reveals a particular kind of thinking. Whoever prepared it believed the outside world could be used. A cleaner would trust the warning. A worker would not inspect the bag. A machine would destroy the evidence. Garbage collection would carry the remains away. Residents would continue with their lives. Habib might remain a missing person rather than a homicide victim. The plan depended on ordinary people following ordinary routines. But one ordinary thing went wrong. The bag tore. When people hear about a killing connected to barbecue smoke, the immediate reaction is usually disbelief. For that? Could someone really die because of that? But the smoke was only the first visible layer. Underneath it were years of humiliation, resentment, confinement, money, property, health, cultural insult, reputation, marriage, and the feeling that no authority would solve anything. Habib believed he could not safely enjoy his own home. Ko believed he was being controlled inside a home he had struggled to buy. The condominium board saw a dispute too small to justify expensive action. Property management encouraged compromise. Police recommended calm communication. Neighbors avoided taking sides. Every institution pushed the conflict back toward the same two men. Resolve it yourselves. That advice assumes the people involved still want resolution. By the end, Habib and Ko did not appear to want the same thing. Each wanted the other to lose. That difference is everything. Compromise asks, how can we live beside each other? Escalation asks, how can I make the other person give up? Once a conflict reaches that stage, every act becomes proof of disrespect. If Ko grilled, Habib saw an attack. If Habib complained, Ko saw an attack. If Habib made noise, Ko escalated the cooking. If Ko invited friends, Habib disrupted the gathering. If Habib spread rumors, Ko confronted him. No one trusted the other's explanation. No one believed the other's discomfort was legitimate. The homes were physically close, but psychologically the men had placed each other in opposing camps. That does not excuse what happened. It does not make Habib responsible for his own death. It does not turn murder into an unavoidable conclusion. It only explains why a conflict that looked trivial from the outside had stopped feeling trivial to the people trapped inside it. There is another uncomfortable issue here. Several warning moments appeared before the death. The public confrontation. The deliberate religious provocation. The water poured onto the balcony. The late-night noise. The accusations of sexual misconduct. The allegation of human trafficking. The open shouting. The years of complaints. Any one of those incidents might still have looked manageable. Together, they showed a relationship deteriorating without interruption. Yet no intervention broke the pattern. By June 6, residents were used to hearing the two men argue. That familiarity may have reduced the sense of danger. A shout from a peaceful apartment might alarm everyone. A shout from two neighbors known for conflict can sound like more of the same. The cousin heard help. Isabel reportedly explained it as filming. Other neighbors heard movement and did not call. Silence returned. Habib missed tennis hours later. Sometimes a community does not ignore a warning because people do not care. They ignore it because the warning resembles something they have heard before. That is one of the most unsettling parts of this file. The final night may not have sounded different enough from the previous 3 years. And now return to the garbage room. The cleaner sees a heavy package. A note tells him not to open it. The explanation is designed to stop curiosity. Sharp glass. Metal scraps. Renovation waste. Nothing to worry about. He tries to follow the instruction. The bag tears. A blanket appears. Liquid escapes. The smell changes everything. That accidental tear did what access records, missing person notices, and neighborhood rumors had not yet done. It transformed absence into evidence. Habib was no longer a man who might have gone somewhere without telling friends. He was a dead man hidden inside his own residential community. From there, investigators moved through the fob, the garage, the bicycle, the downstairs apartment, the conflicting statements, the discarded property, the cleaning, the note, the tape, the DNA, and the fingerprint. No single early clue gave them the entire truth. The camera did not show enough. The apartment looked too clean. The body could not reveal the exact cause of death. The witnesses heard only fragments. The suspect had an explanation for almost everything. But the explanations could not survive when placed beside one another. He took the bicycle because he wanted Habib to walk. He discarded the tennis racket and computer bag because he wanted to annoy him. He entered the apartment because Habib had once given him a key. He did not hear the screams because he was asleep. Yet the cousin said he was not home. His DNA reached the tape because he lived near a shared garbage room. His fingerprint reached the note for the same reason. The apartment was cleaned because homes are cleaned. The items were new because household items are replaced. Any one answer might create doubt. Together, they created a pattern the jury rejected. This is why the smallest object in the file may also be the most important. Not the bicycle. Not the access fob. Not even the blanket. A piece of paper. A short handwritten request. The writer believed the note would prevent questions. Instead, it became one of the strongest questions in the entire case. Who touched this paper? Who prepared this package? Who expected a worker to destroy it? And if the death was only an accident, why did the concealment look so deliberate? The legal process answered part of that. Coe was convicted. Isabel was convicted of helping conceal what happened to Habib's body. An appeal was expected. Sentencing remained ahead according to the source file. But the emotional ending of this case came much earlier. It came when a cleaner noticed that something described as glass did not feel like glass. It came when a cousin heard a cry and stayed behind the door. It came when a friend waited for a tennis partner who never arrived. It came when two neighbors stopped seeing each other as human beings with competing needs and started seeing each other only as obstacles. And maybe that is the final contradiction. The conflict began because both men wanted control over the same small piece of air. One wanted to cook beneath it. The other wanted to breathe above it. Years later, one man was dead, another was convicted of murder, a wife faced prison, a family lost someone just as his dream was nearing completion, and an entire community was left asking how something so ordinary had reached such a violent end. The answer may be that it did not happen because of one barbecue. It happened through hundreds of moments in which anger was rewarded, humiliation was remembered, compromise felt like defeat, and silence was mistaken for peace. The final package was wrapped in layers. So was the conflict. Smoke. Complaints. Noise. Water. Insults. Rumors. A confrontation. A cry for help. A missing appointment. A door opened with a dead man's key. A bicycle ridden away. A note on a garbage bag. And beneath every layer, the same question. At what point could this still have been stopped? Because by the time the cleaner tore the plastic, the answer was already inside.